Content warning. The following stories you're about to hear contain extremely sensitive subject matter. And this video is not intended for children or anyone sensitive to the subject of suicide, drug overdoses, or sexual assault. If the following may discomfort you, then please exit this video and feel free to view another video. Otherwise, the stories will now proceed. So my uncle used to work a lot when I was younger. He's done a lot of different things to make money, but one consistent thing is that in the summer months and into late fall, he'd paint houses. It's a legitimate business and everything. He's got a truck with a number and a name and supplies in the back. The works. Every now and then he would call my dad when he needed a little extra help, and I'd work for him. No big deal really. It's just painting houses. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it takes a while to paint a whole house. If the weather conditions aren't right, then you can't paint. One particular fall was extremely wet. It rained for what felt like every single day. My uncle would paint multiple houses at a time, so sometimes he would get caught up due to situations like these and have to work a little bit more than usual. That was fine by me though. The job wasn't hard and it paid well. Anyway, it was a warm day for one late fall, but there was still a distinct chill in the air. One that kind of penetrated through you and stung your soul. My uncle had this job and he had to finish it. It was an old Victorian house in a quiet part of town. A lady and her husband, who was an author, lived there. Due to the weather, it had taken longer than expected to paint the house, and there were family issues going on at the time, which further complicated things. So, my uncle gets a call one day from the lady who lives at the house. She says that her husband is trying to write his next book, but he keeps getting distracted by the scaffolding outside. So she wanted to know if we would come over and finish the job as soon as possible. My uncle was always an honest businessman. They had contracted him to do the job in midsummer, but he had lots of jobs on in the summer. And the wet conditions I mentioned above made it difficult to finish anything. However, these people were insistent but really polite, and not wanting to lose customers or get bad recommendations, my uncle decided to put the house as a high priority. After all, it would only take a day or two to finish. So we show up at this house mid-afternoon, and like I said, it was a weird kind of chilly that day, and I also remember a really eerie calm. The day was kind of overcast, so everything was shrouded in grey. It was like the perfect setting for a mystery crime novel. So we arrive at the house, and my uncle and I move to the back. The front of the house was already done, so there was nothing left to do there. My uncle, being the more experienced painter, would always do the touch-ups, and I would simply apply the first coats, since they took little skill. Anyway, we get to the back of the house and he asked me if I'm scared of heights. I was 17 at the time, and although they do creep me out a little, I didn't want to seem like a child in front of my uncle, so I told him I wasn't. He was happy to hear that. He has me climb up the scaffold to the third floor to finish the upper section of the house. There was a window up there, a small little oval one that looked into the attic, and the attic also happened to be the husband's study. He would do most of his writing in there. So I climbed up the scaffolding, cans of paint dangling behind me, and various paintbrushes and other tools in the utility belt that my uncle let me borrow. I get to the top of the scaffolding and set up all my supplies. I crack open a can of paint and start painting like I had a few hundred times beforehand. Outside of the temperature, the overcast and the eerie calm, This day was like any other. I'm working my way across the top part of the house when I get to the window that looks into the study. I bend down, dip my paintbrush, and stand back to paint the window. The window was in my direct line of sight, and I couldn't help gazing in. I see a man, the husband staring back at me with a face completely barren of any emotion. I'd never seen a face so devoid of any feeling before, and I still haven't. Of course, I get startled and take a step back. I chuckle and smile at the guy, but he doesn't smile back. Instead, while remaining completely emotionless, he draws a pistol up to his head that he was holding in his hand the whole time and proceeds to blow his brains out. Without even breaking eye contact, right in front of me, whilst I'm staring at him. In utter shock, I gasp and let out the smallest scream as I step back in fear. Only I stepped back too much and fell off the scaffolding. Alerted by the gunshot, my uncle looked up in enough time to see me fall off the scaffolding from the 3rd storey. I was lucky enough to land in a bush and only suffer a broken ankle and a few scratches. The biggest wounds happened in my head. I had to go to counselling for a while. It's been years since then, and I still remember that man's face. I've never forgotten it. It will always be burned in the back of my head. I know why, looking back, his face was so devoid of any emotion. Because he never felt any emotion at all. He literally didn't care about what he was doing. As it turns out, the man was seriously depressed and facing marital issues with his wife, combined with a few too many nights drunk on whiskey and facing writer's block, I guess. He decided he couldn't take it anymore. His wife moved out of the house too shortly after, and we never finished the job. That house remains abandoned, and to this day, I try not to drive down the street that it's on. I'm scared that if I do go back and happen to pass the backyard, I'll see the man staring back at me from the window, cold and emotionless. This was back when I was probably about 8 or 10 years old, so my sister was about 4 or 6 years old. My memory isn't great from back then, but this is etched in my brain. My family lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my slightly older cousins and their family were visiting from Puerto Rico for a few weeks. So naturally, they wanted to go see the city. This was a weekday, so my dad was working, and my aunt and uncle decided to go up to the wine country for the day, or something for the day. That left my mother to drive and take care of 4 kids under 14 years old in the city. The beginning of the day went well, and we all walked around doing the touristy stuff like eating taffy, going to the fisherman's, and looking at the sea lions. We decided to stop for lunch at a small place near where the ferry launches to go to Alcatraz, and proceeded to sit and eat on some long cement bench things. One of my cousins and I ate our food and started goofing off, chasing each other around. You know, being stupid kids that everyone around probably hated. My mother, being the saint that she is, was probably just trying to let us burn off some steam and let us play, but kept a close eye out. Now there's 4 of us, mind you, and 2 of us are being brats, so keeping an eye on everything was probably not the easiest of tasks, especially when we're all in different directions. I started running back towards my mother, who was smiling in my direction, and this is where the day turns. I'm watching all of this happen from 20 to 25 yards away. My sister, while my mum was looking at me, stood up and started walking along the cement bench, and was maybe 5 feet from my mother, who had no idea that she'd gotten up. And this part is etched in my brain. A middle-aged man, maybe 35, woman in a pink top, walked right past my mum and to my sister, picked her up from behind and just started walking off. My sister didn't make a sound, and I don't even think she knew what was going on. When you're that age, you're always being picked up, and I'm I'm sure she just assumed it was Mum. I was watching a strange woman walk away with my baby sister, and that's when my mother turned around, didn't see my sister behind her, and instead in the arms of some lady walking away. Now they say to never get in the way of a mama bear and her cubs, and this was no different. My mother dove off after them, grabbing my sister and pushing the lady away. My mum began yelling and screaming at the lady who pretended she could only speak Chinese. The lady ended up running off before anyone even thought about calling the cops. My mum was just crying and holding my sister, and my cousins and I were just standing there in disbelief. Since then, my mother had been even more of a hawk on us when out in public, until we were old enough to go out alone. But this whole thing could have ended up terrible. I can only imagine what someone would want a young girl for. This world is a fucked up place, and people like this lady deserve to be in hell. I became more vigilant and vowed to protect my sister no matter what now. Whenever I'm with her now, which isn't often as I live on my own, I still don't let her out of my sight. There's creeps everywhere, and she's still just a kid at 18. A week after gaining my CPR certification, I had to try and perform CPR on a woman dying of a heroin overdose. I was at a thrift store when some friends were looking for some Halloween costumes, and someone came in saying that someone was passed out in the parking lot. I was in the dressing room, and it just got super quiet. So I came out and told them that I was certified, I'd go to take a look, and that they needed to call 911. I don't see anyone on the ground. Someone comes out and shouts that the person is in the car that's parked far out by itself. I ran over and honestly freaked the fuck out. She was pretty much already dead. Completely blue in the face, slumped against her car window. She had the red druggy rings around her eyes, but those were blue too because she was so oxygen deprived. We opened the door, and I'll never forget that when we turned her head to see if she still had a pulse, she had tears running down her face. We pulled her out the car, put her on the ground, and took her pulse again because the first person to do it wasn't sure. We started CPR and the ambulance arrived about a minute after. They got her out the car and got her strapped up and continued CPR. They had another ambulance come, and those EMTs got out, and there was literally like 6 of them surrounding her. The cop told us they had administered some type of drug that can apparently reverse heroin overdoses if given in time, but she was still pretty much dead already. They would do the necessary stuff until they could get to the hospital and call it, according to him. I just remember when we opened the door there was a heroin needles and empty pill bottles all over the floor. She wasn't very old. We also think she had kids. She had some toys and a car seat, plus 2 names tattooed on her. This is not supernatural creepy, but it's one of the more disturbing and surreal experiences of my life. One early morning a few short years ago, I'm walking to my bus stop and eating a banana. It's misty, dark, and around 5 AM, and I'm internally debating something trivial, like if I want my daily Starbucks before or after the commute. As I approach the dimly lit corner of my street, a tall man in a black mask steps out of the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disorientated, I barely acknowledge him when he shouts, "Put down your fucking purse," and points his gun to my head, and then things start to click. The man then says, "Put down your bags," and I tell him, okay, I'm putting them down over here." He orders me to walk over to him, towards the alley, and to get down on the fucking ground. And I agree. I'm coming, okay. My heart is beating 1,000,000 times a minute, and my hands still smell sticky with banana. I know I need to get away. I don't know why, but my mouth won't stop working. Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please, just take my stuff. But he doesn't like it. Shut the fuck up, okay? He gets on top of me and puts the gun to my head. At this point, I should mention the fact that I'm on my way to coach a high school practice, and I'm dressed like a dude. Huge baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my telltale voice, I'd look like a prepubescent 90s rap star. Anyway, as the guy gets on top of me, gun to my head, he looks at me and pauses. I can't tell you why I know this, but I swear that at the moment it clicks for him that I'm a woman. He gets off me, stands up, and points to the dark alley. Come with me. My stomach hurts. I remember there had been a recent rash of sexual assaults in my neighbourhood, during the daytime no less. When the man points down the dirty alleyway, my internal voice speaks the fuck up. Voice number 1 says, "There was no way in hell you were going down there without a fight." Voice number 2 says, "But he has a gun, you dipshit." "Fucking follow me," the real voice says, his voice. So I do what I do best. I talk. "I'm coming, I'm following you," I call. And the man makes a crucial mistake. He believes me. I take 1-2 tiny steps backwards toward the sidewalk, and he turns his body and his gun. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, tuck my head down in case he starts shooting, and start sprinting away. I hear a voice screaming in a high-pitched wail before I realise that it's mine. After running 6 or 7 blocks, I head back to my apartment hoping he's not there to see where I lived. The police check out the alleyway an hour later, but the potential attacker is long gone. The only evidence of the encounter is my banana peel browning in the alleyway, and the adrenaline rush that I couldn't shake for days. I'd be lying if I said that the experience doesn't bother me still, but I'm so fortunate to mainly be haunted by the what ifs and not the what dids.